Rishi, welcome. What are the key factors that have driven the growth of the private market investment industry to get us to where we are today?
So there's a few contributing factors. I think we have to acknowledge first and foremost that the very low interest rate policy that has been in effect for the better part of the last decade, if not longer, was certainly had a hand to play in it, right? Because all of the real money investors, pension funds, endowments, foundations, insurance companies, they're all effectively managing to deliver a return that matches their liabilities, their obligations, right? And to obtain that return was very difficult when interest rates were near zero. So a natural offset to that was taking on some of that complexity and illiquidity risk premium that is embedded in private markets investing and capturing that, right? And so that has driven a fair degree of interest and growth, initially by institutional investors. And then when the merits of the underlying asset classes became much more evident in terms of the lower volatility, the focus on real value, long-term drivers of fundamental value creation as opposed to sentiment and a lot of noise embedded in markets, it compounded, right? So the interest has grown exponentially. And it is not surprising now that private markets across private equity, real estate, credit, and infrastructure are much more mainstream for us as institutions as well as for the private wealth segment.
What do you see as some of the most promising growth opportunities in the digital economy?
So I think the talk of the town nowadays, of course, not surprisingly, is generative AI, right? But if you take a step back, the application of not just generative AI, but the broader benefits of digitalization is highest in the corporate sector, in the business segment, right? So if you take the perspective that I want to invest not just in the gold rush or not in the gold rush, but in the providers of the picks and shovels, the places that we see of being most interesting in terms of the digital economy are the providers of the basic foundation that will enable the application of AI, quantum computing, etc., for businesses, being the cloud, being quantum computing, being the SaaS infrastructure that supports it, and so on. So, the broader ecosystem surrounding AI is, I think, really where digital economy has got a lot to offer as an investment theme. The other place that I would want to add, because sometimes we kind of miss it, is climate innovation. Right, a lot of innovation is going to be needed and is coming through to address the risks surrounding climate change. And that innovation is naturally relying on a lot of digital application of both software and hardware to refine current processes within industry and across different segments of industry to make them more sustainable and climate resilient. And that, I think, is going to be a major opportunity in the next 3 decades.
How do business leaders strike the right balance, though, between innovation and risk management?
Yeah, okay, that's a tricky question because, I've spent the better part of the last 30 years and InvestCorp in aggregate almost 40 plus years now trying to do exactly that, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to recognize that your investors are giving you capital on one hand to support that agility that you bring to the table, that entrepreneurial spirit, that, being fleet-footed in terms of identifying attractive themes and then opportunities within those themes, executing upon them, but just identification is not enough. You have to execute upon them and, create value and then monetize them. So that all that requires that mindset of entrepreneurship, right? But at the same time, they are also relying on us, particularly, as an institution, to deliver that safety net to them, that risk mitigation, that mindset of there is an upside to be captured, but with contained downside. And that is really where that institutional spirit also has a role to play. So, we kind of use the tagline at InvestCorp, InvestCorp is a firm into which, culturally we've tried to embed the twin concepts of entrepreneurial spirit with an institutional mindset. And it requires hard work because that is culture, as propagates through osmosis. You don't dictate it, you don't write it down in books. It happens, through my engagement with my team, their engagement with their team, and so on. And it propagates, and that's really where I think we have done exceptionally well so far.
Rishi, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.